What's going on YouTube? This is just going to be another patch note overview, basically. This is going to be 9.1, I believe. It doesn't say it in here, but yeah, it's going to be 9.1, I believe. It's going to be titled Tommy is Sus. I think that's just entirely based on the fact there's going to be a new secret card, and we'll get to that here later. Expected release is the 14th through the 16th, so after Nova Cup. I'm extremely happy they're going to do the next patches after, oh there it is, 9.01, after the Cup this weekend. The previous handful of patches have been done like right before a tournament, and I think that really can throw things off really badly, as you don't really know what's happening. It can be a big pain in the tuchus to jump into a tournament after only having a handful of games of practice with the new patch. That being said, we'll move down. They're going to be updating the crab. So basically it's just going to look a little bit more, I'd say cute, is I guess the best word to describe this. Cute. They're saying it's going to have a glow up here. So it's going to have new model, animations, and sounds. It's definitely going to look a lot nicer. I'm kind of interested to see how it looks in the game. I know that they've been slowly but surely updating a lot of the graphics, whether it be the UI or otherwise, over the last couple patches. So this is a neat update. And here is the full-size image of the Tommy is Sus card. So it will be a new card drop that can be dropped in the game. Card trader to see what it is. Eventually we'll see it in card shop. Otherwise, usually pretty frequently right off the bat, somebody does some mining and figures out what or how to get the card. I like the Twilight Drake. I think it makes the Drake look a lot different. I'm enjoying some of these newer skins, etc., that just look a lot different. It's I think a positive. Some of them were kind of just more like reskins, and these ones I think are really changing the overall design idea of them. The Easter egg Easter egg sack looks interesting. It definitely looks very cutesy and something like you'd decorate for a Easter egg hunt or something of the sort. They've kind of even added like the ribbons and such like you would see on like an Easter egg basket. And otherwise it looks cute. Not necessarily my thing, but it's neat. We have now the new emote Sag. It seems like they're slowly but surely adding meme emotes into the game. I'm sure we'll continue to see more of them going through. We have a lot of new voices for a lot of the units. It seems like Legendary, Gibby, and Austin are some of the new the two voice actors that were additions. Automatic bug report and essence compensation for major server bugs. The bots are now smarter about mercenary sends. Captain Jack, Juniper, and Dan no longer overbuild early. Audio bots smarter about playing, etc. There's a lot going on here. The thing I really points out to me is the secret card emojis now exist. So if you have the new Tommy is Sus, you just do the colon Tommy is Sus, and it will auto-populate. So I think ETB, the Et tu Brute, will be in there, as well as other things, which I kind of like. It makes it so that you can utilize the cards you do have. You have to have the card, though. It's an important thing to keep in mind. You have to have the card. Otherwise, nothing really too crazy. Hybrid now shows the plus or minus floating text above the unit to show you how much you saved or lost with hybrid, and then some MVP score improvements. Like nothing too crazy there. Some random bug fixes, pretty simple. Classic is now going back to 2 workers, ladies and gentlemen. Can we get a round of applause for the finally getting back to 2 workers? I think Mythium gather rate being lower is fine. I just wanted the 2 workers back because it makes it so that you can actually think about it in a more traditional sense, right? If I have a 5 worker start, I know it's actually 5 workers rather than just weird 4 worker where I forget and sometimes push an extra worker because I forget I'm in classic or I forget they made the change or whatever. So I'm happy about that. So yeah, it's a positive to me. Sprint being enabled in 2v2 now is going to, I think, make the waves a little bit shorter. It should decrease game time. At least that's what the goal is. They are changing a couple things with the Mastermind playstyles. Cartel is going to get a buff met down to -38, and Cash Out getting another buff to 22. We're getting to the dangerously close point now where Cash Out can do a lot more things more consistently. I think the 22 does make for things like Wild Shroom potentially upgradable. There's a couple things that I'm trying to think of that the 2 gold would make a difference, but there's probably a couple niche unit situations where that 2 gold does give you the extra, handful needed to get another unit out or what have you. I think there's been plenty of times I've been at 83 or something of the sort with Cash Out and really want that Windhawk and I don't get it. But we'll see. We're going to have to do a little bit of testing on that. Investment getting nerfed, I'm not surprised by that. It's just a solid late game option in a lot of games right now, or previously we're going pretty late. Today, most of my games have actually ended pretty early. So we'll kind of see what the meta shift is like. I like that Lone's getting a lesser penalty. Magician's getting another buff, because I think Magician right now isn't really picked very often. Or if it is picked, it doesn't really work out very frequently. Pulverizer feels good. Villain felt good, so I feel like those nerfs are not unwarranted, but gonna see how they kind of go forward. The big thing for me is king changes. The thing for me is that he should theoretically, and they talk about it here, miss fewer attacks. The big thing I always raged about, and it just is annoying, right, is when the king attacks but you have immolation and the immolation kills it, or you have a spell happening and the spell zaps something yet the king is still in animation and it hits a dead unit. Like, that couple hits in some of the early waves especially can be really detrimental when you take an extra percentile of damage, giving the other team a little bit of gold, etc. But yeah, I'm excited to see how this all works out. They also are making it because of sprint, so that the king is a little faster, which I think makes sense. But we'll see. I'm not necessarily sure how it will pan out. It's one of those things you have to kind of get in games and play around with it a little bit to see if it really makes sense or not, how it necessarily figures into the game, etc. Looter change, pack rat change, same DPS but slightly lower damage. Just faster attack speed. It's now strong against wave 2, otherwise we're nerfing it due to its 55% win rate. Or, excuse me, slightly lower DPS for pack rat, but similar is unchanged DPS for looter. My apologies. Shadow said the game is probably going to get starved because of sprint. What do you think? I'm not sure how it will differentiate things, to be honest. With sprint, I think waves should be shorter, so we'll kind of see how it goes. Oathbreaker now is going to be a little bit better on 1. I think it should still probably leak. I think it should still probably leak a couple times to a snail, but I'm going to be testing that. Oathbreaker, I think, should leak, right? Like, it's one of those really low-cost setups that I think should have a punishment to 1. But I think leaking 90% like it did was a little bit on the heavy side. Sky Queen, I still think, isn't great as an opener. This might make it a little bit more viable mid to late game. Sky Queen is constantly one of those units, so they're constantly buffing, nerfing, because it never seems to necessarily hit the mark. It's either overpowered or too crap, to be honest. Pyro, DPS unchanged, but just less counterable by Safety Mole. Not surprised. The Daphne is getting some slight debuffs, kind of. But there is some damage amplification against the bosses that are not bosses anymore in the Scorpion King, Giant Quadrupus, and Legion King. So they're not inherently getting nerfed by being taken off as bosses, but they are now different in that sense. I don't know exactly how this will change the wave for Scorp King Quad and Legion King, but we'll kind of see how it goes. That being said, onto the Grarl. Grarl should leak a little bit more consistently in some of the early game scenarios where you utilize it, but I don't think this will change too much. Again, 50 health isn't a ton, but you're, I think, a little bit more susceptible to potentially leaking on two, and surrounding waves to the snail or DT, etc. I still think Grarl's a good unit in this sense, but I'm curious to see what a snail now will leak the Grarl on wave 2, because right now it's anywhere from like 33 to 42%, and if it leaks higher, 50 plus, you're going to be limited in like 5 worker opens with Grarl, which I don't think is necessarily bad. King Claw's getting a buff because, well, King Claw feels really underwhelming right now. Ocean Templar is kind of now going to be a little bit more niche. The 15% magic reduction versus 20 makes it a lot worse at buffing certain units, especially like natural damage types. But Ocean Templar now is going to be more of a damage unit, which works. Trinity Archer, Elite Archer getting another buff, baby. I'm loving it. Trinity Archer, Elite Archer are probably some of my favorite units right now. I think they're super underrated and great damage dealers, especially if you add something like an APS with them. They just shred waves. Much love to Trinity Archer, Elite Archer from me. Gatling and Vulcan getting nerfed. I think it was way overdue. Gatling Vulcan are stupid strong. And then on to some of the different changes with gates. Gates are now going to be a lot less mana reliant, as well as a lot less aura reliant. The summons are now going to be quite a bit weaker. 25% health and damage across all summons is a lot of change, but we get the spawns out a lot quicker with a 33% spawn rate buff. So I think they're going to be a lot less of a slow burn now, right? And they're going to be a lot more of a quick-paced pop-out thing. The spawns no longer degenerate, which makes them a lot better at not getting aggro on waves, whether it be the frontline or backline mercs, out of backline units out of the gate. But I'm interested to see how this affects Gate overall. I think Gate right now is definitely an overpowered unit when you have the right combo. It's an oppressive unit, and a unit combination like Ocean Templar Gate or Butcher Gate can be really difficult to deal with. But I also don't know if now they're going to be a little bit too swarmy at times because of the positives, right? I think giving them something like a Disciple, or Starcaller I should say, buff, now kind of makes them really pop units out, which I don't necessarily dislike. They can potentially sustain themselves a little bit better, but we'll kind of see what happens. Great Boar Red Eyes, completely removing the attack speed reduction. I don't dislike this move. I know some in the community have been calling for a Boar Red Eyes nerf, and I would agree it's probably one of the best tanks in the game right now, maybe sans Yazora or Egg, depending on how you look at it. Great Boar Red Eyes are definitely really strong. Some people have been calling for a nerf or a removal of the splash damage, and I think that is not the right way to go, right? Because that's kind of the whole point of a Boar, in my opinion, is to do the AoE type splash damage, right? I think you can make the argument for reducing the range of its splash so it can't kill backline mercenaries necessarily or damage them. But I think the real thing about Boars and Red Eyes especially is they didn't have many weak waves once you got them going because they slowed down the things attacking it, right? Like on wave 16, for instance, the only reason why Boars were still utilizable as tanks on that wave is because they could just dive in, splash the wave, and delay for a while before they got attacked and died, right? That in itself was, I think, the inherent issue with Boar. There was nothing you can do to stop them once they got in numbers because when they hit, they stopped all your damage, right? And I think this should help with that. It makes them more susceptible to frontline mercenaries like on wave 19. If you really have to go there, it should stop you from being literally unable to kill them on like wave 18 at times, etc. Though I still think their synergies are good. If you have Disciple, some mana unit that does magic, whether it be Lord of Death or Zeus or something, I still think these are going to be a good combination. But we'll have to see. Time will tell. They're definitely still strong. But I do think Soulgate and... oops, excuse me. Not my intended thing. Soulgate nerf and Boar nerf were probably needed. But we'll see how it ends up, right? Some changes here. Pack and Hermit no longer double buff on Scorp King, Giant Quadrupus, Legion King. That's basically just making it so 5, 15, and 21 are no longer getting the double buff. So you still get the 7, but you won't get the 14 or whatever it was with the pack leader. But yeah, Hermit's getting a slight DPS increase. I think this kind of to compensate for potentially the nerf to them slightly. That does make them a little bit better at just overall magic damage on a wave, so you could maybe make the argument that Hermit's a little bit more utilizable early game. I was really surprised with the Witch nerf in attack speed. I feel like Witch right now doesn't get utilized much, at least around my elo. Maybe I'm just not noticing it when it is sent, but a lot of times it isn't used super heavily. I think the Centaur buff is needed. Centaurs kind of feel bad right now. Ghost Knight again is a little surprising. I felt Ghost Knight was actually pretty strong now with its 4,000 health. It felt like one of the best frontline mercenary sends to me. And Kraken buff, I guess I kind of see it. Kraken isn't utilized much, but I think the problem is Kraken isn't utilized much because there's so much single target damage right now in the meta. When you can have a single Radiant Halo, a Radiant Halo just shreds Kraken or any frontline mercenary, right? Which makes it difficult to send them, as well as Kraken's 400. You have to really need to send a Kraken, as well as right now income sends have still been pretty prevalent. Early game, you don't see Krakens because you can't get a 400 out. And late game, in a lot of situations, you either don't want a Kraken because of single target damage, or you want other things to counter the DPS in other ways. We'll see what happens. Kraken's still 18 and even 19, 20, etc. It's still usable, or was usable in the past, but we'll kind of see what happens. I'm curious to see what the interaction changes are for the waves when it comes to 15, or between 15, 5, and 21 with the not being considered bosses anymore. I think that makes it so that Honeyflower, Deathcap, etc. do less damage to them, but Pulverize is more likely to damage them, right? Or more likely to pulverize them, I think is what the case is. Slight 12 buff I think is needed. 12 kind of feels bad unless you're sending a ton of value, but even then it still kind of just feels like junk. 13 right now, I can see a slight buff there. The health buff doesn't really hurt me that much. I'm kind of confused by the 17 buff. I feel like a lot of my games actually end on 17. Whether that's because of long saving or what have you, I think 17 felt pretty good, but a slight increase in it, I guess, isn't the end of the world. And 18 getting a slight nerf doesn't feel like too crazy of a reaction either. I feel like You could make the argument that 17 felt weak because so much fortified and natural armor is kind of like the common place tank right now. And 18 felt bad because fortified is so prevalent, and there isn't really much of a swift tank anymore outside of Yuzora. But yeah, that's kind of it. That was a little bit of a longer reading, but hope you guys enjoyed this one, kind of walking through everything. Just remember, guys, Tommy is sus. Okay, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.